Well, let's take a deeper look at U.S. Brazil economic ties with Gustavo Ribeiro. He's the founder and content director at the Brazilian Report. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, given all the ideological comparisons drawn between the two leaders before today, what was your overall impression of this White House meeting?
Well, Brazil gave up a lot more than it asked for. For instance, Brazil decided to accept an importing quota for American wheat, allowing a lot of this product to come into Brazil with no tariffs. And in return, it only got a promise from Donald Trump that the United States will visit Brazil again and inspect beef plants. There was no promise whatsoever to open the U.S. market again for Brazilian beef, which was one of the main demands of Brazil's big agro, one of the pillars in the Bolsonaro coalition. The Brazilian president also waived visa requirements for American tourists, as well as for Canada, Japan, and Australia, and only got promises that in the future maybe the U.S. will try to loosen up a bit visa policies for Brazilians, which have gotten tougher under Donald Trump. So it was, Brazil gave up a lot more than it got in return. It was more a rhetoric, a win for Bolsonaro in terms of rhetoric instead of a win in terms of actual consequences.
So while we didn't really get much meat on the bones in terms of potential deals, what are some of the key ways that each country's economy can benefit from closer ties with the other?
Well, Brazil has wanted to get into the U.S. market in terms of agriculture, and the U.S., especially under Donald Trump, have put in place a lot of protectionist measures. But once again, this meeting has not shown us any progress in terms of actual trade. It's more a rhetoric win for Bolsonaro. It's not the first time that Brazil's and America's presidents buddy up. Bill Clinton and Fernando Henrique Cardoso in the 90s have a very good relationship. So did George W. Bush and Lula, and it didn't translate into closer ties, closer economic ties between the two countries. On the contrary. So at this point, Brazil has nothing to show for. The fact that this meeting has not brought consequential announcements is reflected on the stock market. For instance, the stock market closed with a slight down. Investors were not that excited about what Mr. Bolsonaro had to show for.
Now, we know that Brazil is a member of the BRICS nations, which obviously includes China, a country that's still hammering out its trade frictions with the U.S. So how are U.S.-China tensions impacting U.S.-Brazil relations?
Well, Donald Trump has been very hostile to Beijing. His sons, which are very important members of the government, even if they don't hold cabinet positions, they defend a total alignment with the U.S. and in detriment to Brazil-China relations. However, the Bolsonaro government is a patchwork of political forces. Alongside with the Bolsonaro's family, we have agricultural producers who depend a lot on China. China has imported half of Brazil's commodities and about 30% of Brazil's overall exports. So they are not willing to let the president deteriorate the relations between the two countries. And we also have the military wing, which is a big part of this administration, who also defend a more sensible agenda. In Washington, Economy Minister Paulo Guedes, he criticized Brazil's overdependence on China, as he put it, but said that Chinese investors, they take the slack for the trade that Americans are not doing to the U.S. So it was a way of putting pressure and saying that if Donald Trump and the U.S. are bothered by China's growing influence in Brazil and in Latin America, that they should pay more attention to the region, which they haven't in past years.
All right, thank you so much for your insights. Gustavo Ribeiro there, founder and content director at the Brazilian Report.